Where we last left off in our Chimera Ant review, Gon had come face to face with the body of Kite, and the king of the Chimera Ants had begun his march towards East Gorteau. And with these, the king and his guardsmen take over the palace and set up shop, taking over the nation itself. With Gon and Killua reuniting with the others, what could they possibly do against the threat that is the Chimera Ants? Before we find out about that, cue the theme song.
Manga, animator, anything, alright, let's do this. Weekly is the basis, worst generation, cooking up a feast while he's turning through the pages. Theories that he's making, from shonen to seinen, blocked in, analyzing, using observation. Yeah, observation, rambling addiction.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Rambling Addiction, the series where I talk and you listen. I'm your host, StrawHatLucas, and tonight we are going to be doing the final part of my Chimera Ant review. Now, I have a lot to say in this part. It's the reason I split this up into two parts, because there is so much that happens in the second half of Chimera Ant. So let's start with the test that Morel presents to Gon. Morel asks Gon to hit him as hard as he can to prove that he is ready to take on the Chimera Ants. And Morel stops Gon before he does it because Morel says if he does this, he will take me out. And I love this because it's kind of a callback to earlier in the series when they said something about Nin being tied to emotions. And with the emotional state that Gon is currently in because of what is going on with Kite, and they're getting ready to go siege against these Chimera Ants, what a way to bring this back. And to see Gon in such a state, our man is always happy-go-lucky, even if he is a little haphazard with the way he treats himself and puts himself and his friends at times in danger. It is hard to see Gon in this second half of the arc. He just seems so defeated and he's trying to keep up the hope, but after seeing Kite in the state that he was in, you can tell that it's very hard for the boy to keep that spirit up. But yes, with Gon passing Morel's test, we move on to the plan to attack the palace of East Gorteau. And the plan goes as follows. Netero will take out the king. Gon and Killua will go after Pitou because Gon requested, wanting to see the person who took out Kite face to face once more. Knuckle and Shoot handle Youpi, and Morel and Nove will handle Pouf. The plan is to attack on the day of the secession. The plan is to attack on the selection day, an event that the king of the Chimera Ants is taking advantage of to gather all of the residents of East Gorteau into one place and begin converting them into his new army. Now, after this, we kind of cut over to the spiders.
It's been a while, huh? Hasn't changed a bit.
That's right, the Phantom Troupe are back. And we see them as they enter their home of Meteor City. I do have to say real quick, I'm fully caught up on the manga now, and going back and revisiting some of this stuff after being manga current, emotional damage. But yes, we see that the spiders are taking out Zazan, who is trying to set up her own Chimera Ant hive nest in Meteor City. Yeah, so this is just like kind of a quick cutaway, but it's really cool to see that we're keeping up with the Phantom Troupe through all of this. Yeah, I don't have much to comment on about it, if I'm being honest. I felt like it was just a kind of like, well, where are they? And like, what are they doing right now? To kind of take away from how tense things are in East Gorteau, especially going into what we're about to get into. Actually, before we move on from the Zazan stuff, I know I said I didn't have much to say about it, but hold up. Phaeton doing the umbrella stuff? Just insane. Just so good, right? Like, I was waiting for him to do something awesome since he was introduced in York New, and I'm gonna say it, Phaeton did not disappoint no matter how annoying his voice is. Anyway, back to East Gorteau. Killua and Gon explore a nearby village only to find it empty. Now, while Gon goes into hiding, Killua suspects that they have an ability to control the citizens, and that's how they will get the 5 million people for selection day. And I will say it's kind of rough seeing Killua going up to these citizens and being like, hey, this is going down, you need to get out of here. And none of them believe him, right? None of them believe this dude at all, because 1, who is he? 2, what's he doing in East Corto? 3, he's saying some nonsensical stuff about giant bugs. But nonetheless, it is crushing to see him do this. And then he gets into the fight with Leol's squad and ends up defeating the goat of all goats that was introduced in this arc, Ikalgo.
Nande.
Yeah, I love this guy. He is an octopus chimera ant, and he is just adorable, and he's funny. He's got some really good one-liners, and him becoming friends with Killua. It's just really well done, and I love that we got a side character this late in the game that wanted to help the hunters. Well, not necessarily at first, right? But once Killua was like, yeah, you're my friend, come on, let's go. That's when he wanted to, for sure, help them. Togashi is just such a good writer that he can introduce a side character this late in the game and you still fall in love with that character immediately, right? This guy's power is cool. He can control people, and he makes these like little bug bullets that come out of a sniper rifle, and he becomes really useful in parts that we will talk about later. Going back to Gon, we see that he is taking out a large number of chimera ants, and these chimera ants were actually sent out by one specific chimera ant known as Meruem. I cannot say his name very well, please bear with me, who was doing this to test Gon and decides he can trust Gon.
So you were lying to me?
I'm not like those other guys. I only tell the truth all the time.
And this is yet again another chimera ant who will be integral to the final bouts with the king and his guardsmen. And this is something that I have to give to Togashi right here, is that he makes us care about the chimera ants so much, which I know there has been mangaka before who have made you care about some of the villain's underlings or this or that, but there's, I don't know, something different about this, because these chimera ants realize we can coexist together. There's no reason to take each other out. There is no dominant in this situation. The only answer is coexistence with humans. In a way, they remember their humanity and what it means to live in this society. And it's something special, right? And speaking of humanity, let's talk about the king and his obsession with Gunji. To the annoyance of Youpi, Pitou, and Pouf, the king has taken up an obsession with the board game Gunji that is famous around the hunterxhunter world. I'm not going to explain the rules of this game. Togashi made it up, and it is super complicated and very interesting, actually. I wouldn't mind trying to play this myself, but like, my God, is this man good at making complex systems for games that no one will ever play. Look at Greed Island and how many cards are there, and then look at Gunji as well. Like, what are you doing, Togashi? Should Togashi start a Hasbro branch in Japan and just make board games once he's done with hunterxhunter? Maybe. He's really good at it. But nonetheless, after going through several of the top dog Gunji players, he comes across a young girl who is the best of the best. Now, after a couple losses against this champion of all champs, and let me remind you that this is a blind little girl with snot dripping down her nose. I won't even lie. When I first met her, I was like, this is going to be an annoying character. I hate the trope of snot coming out of anime characters' noses. I've been very vocal about this before, but oh my God, I had no idea. Because you see, after a couple losses, the king decides to shake things up and try to throw his opponent off by asking her to bet something. He offers to give her anything in the world that she desires if she wins, but if she loses, he will take her left arm. Instead, the girl says, instead of that, why don't you take my life? And this leads to this insane interaction between her and the king where she asks him, what is your name? And this is actually because we heard Meruem's name when the queen uttered it earlier, but this is when the king himself takes his name as his own and learns of a human's name and cares to remember it. Komaki. See, there was a reason I wasn't saying either of their names up until now. But yeah, the impact of this moment, it was when I realized this isn't just a, one-man killing machine. This is a sentient creature that has feelings and the potential for growth. And that is something that is prevalent throughout all of Chimera Ant, which is something I was speaking on earlier with Ikalgo and Chameleon Man, whose name I'm not going to try to say right now. But either way, it's this thematic element of these creatures. It's hard to call them creatures, these beings, right? These Chimera Ants have this sentience to them and this understanding of what it means to be human because of that human factor within them. As we saw in the first half of the arc, some of them even have memories of their human selves, such as Colt. So to see this and to see this growth among the ants, especially in the king, it set up some of the best moments of the arc for me. Stuff that I'm sure I will touch on more in a bit. So during this bet, meruem decides to, well, do this. Causing Pitou to drop the infill that he has around the castle, protecting them. During this, No sees an opportunity to go inside and set up the waypoints so that they can get in and out of the castle with ease. But what he was not expecting is to come across the threatening aura of Pouf.
What is that aura? It's like it's full of everything sinister in the world.
To see such a powerful hunter come to the state that Nob is, and I am going to go forward a little bit here, where we see throughout the arc, because of this moment, his hair turns gray, and then he starts to lose his hair, and it shakes him to the core, to the point where he can no longer take part in the raid anymore, because he is so frightened by the energy he felt, the zetsu he felt coming off of Pouf. Yeah, this shook me a bit, because it showed me the level of the ants, especially the guardsmen, that we really hadn't seen them act much yet. Like, I think we'd seen Pouf and Youpi maybe take out an ant or two or a human or two, you know what I mean? Like, we hadn't seen them do much up until this point besides be kind of menacing. But to see a pro level hunter crumble the way he did just by feeling this ant's presence, it had me shaken. The amount of fear you could see in my poor man No's face was just very real. And I think, once again, credit to Togashi, his ability to express human emotions is just on a whole different level compared to some other mangaka. We then get to a fight between Morel and Pitou, which I'm not going to talk about really. Morel kind of just toys with them and then lets them go, and Pitou loses his nin ability because it doesn't work out in the way he wants it to. So he decides to work on another one. I liked this part. I think it was funny with Morel laying on his pipe and taking a snooze. But other than that, in the little bit of comedy that we get from it, nothing super duper special. We did get to see a little bit of a showing of Morel's powers, but what comes after this is the true showing of Morel's powers, and that is Morel versus Leol.
Leol has pursued Morel into an underground church, where they will now face off in battle.
This fight was insane. Him filling up the chapel area with water, or the underground pathway, whatever it was, with water, and then Morel diving down and creating the air pockets and everything. Just chef's kiss completely.
So good.
This was a great bit of action and showed the other kind of side of the coin. Leol didn't really have any humanity to him. He just wanted power. And even if he had to follow someone else to get that power, he was willing to. And to see Morel take it so personal that Leol had taken the power of a hunter that he knew, I could tell that Morel wasn't going to stop until Leol was gone. We then go back to Komagi and Meruem playing their game of Gungi. And this kind of has a really cool parallel moment. We see through their playing that Komagi does unlock nin abilities, allowing her to think faster and give the king the better game that he wants, making her more of a supernatural force to match the Chimera Ant. But on the other hand, after this, even though he told her, I want you to keep playing and no matter what, don't fall asleep, you don't get to eat kind of thing, he allows her to rest, and then he decides he's going to dispose of Komagi because the board game is kind of getting in his way and it's all he can think about. But on his way there, he sees her being attacked by a crow, and it shows us that that humanity that Meruem had from getting his name is still ongoing. He saves Komagi and shows absolute concern for her, showing that he began to care for this human being in a way that he shouldn't. in a way that perplexes the king and kind of sends him on this journey of almost self-discovery. One that starts to affect his Kingsguard, who do not like the way that he is taking to this human. But yeah, it's an amazing parallel between Komugi and meruem, like I'd said a little bit earlier, that as she awakens this supernatural force to kind of go on par with the ant that is a supernatural creature from the Dark Continent, we'll get there eventually, that meruem starts to awaken the humanity in himself to match the human that is Komugi. It's just so well done, and it's like I keep bringing it up just because it's one of my favorite aspects of the arc, but Togashi just really knew how to make you kind of second guess yourself on the feelings you have about the Chimera ants. When the arc first starts, you see them as nothing but monsters who are going around abducting people, women, children, men, no discrepancy, just taking them and making more Chimera ants. But as we continue through the arc, you come to find yourself in this morally gray area when who is it that's really the greater threat? The Chimera ants or humanity? And I think we start to get our answer to that question as we move into the next parts. Killua realizes that there must be a third party involved if Pitou was using their healing ability at that moment. And because of this, he starts to become hesitant in the plan to attack. And during this, the citizens of East Gorto begin their march towards Selection Day. But as they're moving towards the castle, we get one of the greatest introductions in all of anime, hands down, as Zeno, Zoldyck, and Netero just come in ablazing to start the invasion. Yeah, this is just insane. They lay out an all-out assault on the castle as their boys start to move in through the points that Nove had set up for them. And it is wild to see the ants start to kind of sweat. They're like, oh my god, what's going on? You know what I mean? Except for the king. The king is very calm. And it's even funnier to me that like while all of this is going on, Ikalgo's little self is like going down to the basement to try to figure out where Palm is. My poor little dude probably chose that job to avoid what's going on above him. But as the assault is in full motion, Zeno and Netero are laying it down outside, and we get to the staircase scene. Guys, I'm not gonna hit this beat for beat, but like, what a scene, right? Knuckle and Shoot and Gon and Killua and Melion. I still can't say his name. Just going, and Youpi's there, and it's full chaos. And I've never in my life have I ever felt the stakes were higher watching a series. I don't think there was ever a point where I was watching One Piece, Monster, or like Full Metal Alchemist, or anything that I bring up quite often, where I was sweating so much and being like, what's gonna happen? What's gonna happen? Are they gonna be able to do this? Is Gon about to fight Youpi? He's not ready for that. But if Knuckle doesn't get him, like, whew. But luckily, Knuckle does get him and start his, I think it's called pot clean. Is it potluck? Pot clean? I'll put the actual name of the nin ability up on the screen. But he does get to hit Youpi with that, which allows the assault to continue. But as Zeno and Netero land right after the staircase moment, we get another scene of the king's humanity as he orders Pitou to save Komugi. Then there's this like little moment where Netero's like, and it points Gon to the direction of Pitou, and it's like, okay, it's about to go down. But before Gon can get to Pitou, we have this little moment. It's a very, very small, brief moment with Zeno, where he tells Gon and Killua, like, keep your eyes open and judge the situation carefully. Because he saw the king ask him to save Komugi. This was the moment I was most anticipating within the arc. The confrontation between Gon and Pitou. Gon comes across Pitou healing Komugi and asks them basically, like, what are you doing? What are you doing to this girl? Pitou explains what's going on. And the rage, the pure rage in Gon's eyes. I started to break almost immediately. And Pitou kind of revealing that height cannot be fixed. And Gon saying, okay, then you have 1 hour to finish what you're doing before I fight you.
I'll wait right here for 1 hour.
And it just really, I don't know, it impacted me deeply how much Gon was going through this entire arc. And to have it right here, and I don't know, it just, It broke my heart to see Gon that way, if I'm being honest. Like there's no other way to say that. It had me in my feels the entire time. I didn't even mind the wait to fight Pitou again. Because like I know, like I said, it was my most anticipated moment. I needed to figure out what was going on in Gon's head, and the more time I had to do that, the better. To kind of pick things back up, it's time to talk about Shia Pouf. This is my most hated character in all of Hunter x Hunter. I feel like... I don't even know where to begin, I'm gonna be honest. I feel like everything that Pouf did was in detriment to the Chimera Ants. He was very annoying to me, and then him splitting up into a bunch of chibi Poufs made me even more mad at the character, and just, I don't know. He has a bit of a redemption later with the Netero and meruem fight when him and Youpi save meruem. We'll get to that later, obviously, but yeah, Pouf just did not do it for me. I love Youpi, and I love Pitou, but Pouf just, he annoyed me, he rubbed me the wrong way, and I understand his character, you know, he's very artistic, he's very perfectionist, he needs things to go exactly how they're supposed to be, each piece to go into the place that it fits, but as I said, I think that that trait of his is kind of what caused a lot of the turmoil that comes later in the arc. Yeah, I feel like Pouf is a very selfish character, and I'm gonna move on from him now to the goat, cow goat. Ikalgo is in the basement, right? And he's trying to find Palm. I love this little, like, him sleuthing around and like trying to get on the elevator, and he's taking over the bug bird dude's body. Flutter is his name. I know it, don't worry. But yeah, this was a really like good little break from how tense things were, even if they did keep up that tension, right? Because even though we were cutting to Ikalgo in the basement and trying to find Palm, and we have all that stuff with like, I think it's like Blobster. It's a lobster guy. You guys know who I'm talking about. But we have all that stuff with him, and like I said, this is just like a really cool little break from all of the tension upstairs while maintaining it, and I really enjoyed it. I love Ikalgo. It was wild though that we find that note written in Nin from Palm that's like, hey, assume that I'm gone. And my heart broke in this moment because it's like, she's definitely gone. I mean, we saw her infiltrating the castle and coming across the end. Like, Palm probably got. There's something I do have to address in the video, and I'm going to do it here before we get into Youpi versus like everybody basically. And it's about some stuff that happens with Ikalgo and Wilfin later in the basement when Wilfin interrogates him and stuff. And they find out that like, they knew each other, and they talk about Gyro is his name, I believe, actually. I am confused about the significance of Gyro, if I'm honest. I know that it's more than likely we'll get payoff for him later in the series. When I was watching, one of my homies was like, no, you need to lock in on the Gyro stuff. And I thought it was going to be paid off in the arc, but it wasn't. I mean, we do get some stuff later with Wilfin and meruem and him like deciding to go look for Gyro at the end of the arc. But yeah, I just had to put this in here. I'm confused about the Gyro stuff. If anyone in the comments wants to kind of tell me if I missed something or anything like that that ties him to the rest of the arc thematically or in any other capacity, please do so. I'd rather be candid about it. But anyway, on to Youpi versus basically everybody else. We get this really intense fight between Knuckle and Youpi where Knuckle is giving it his all, but Youpi still has the advantage, even though he's getting frustrated and he's raging, and Knuckle is using that to his advantage. And I remember there's that moment where you think Knuckle's gonna fall, right? You're like, oh my gosh, my boy, my puppy loving boy. We love Knuckle. We don't want this to happen. And Killua with the Godspeed comes in and just starts wailing on Youpi, and Youpi can't get any attacks in. And then when Killua runs out of his electricity and meruem helps him escape, you see Youpi is actually really good with battle tactics. He's like, okay, they're either using teleportation or they got somebody that's making them invisible. And it's so cool to see his thought process in that moment. But then he goes after Morel. And when I tell you guys, I was yelling at the screen with this whole interaction where he's threatening Morel's life and Knuckle is there and he's like, take off APR for me or it's done. I'm taking your teacher out. I was so upset with Knuckle because, you know, Morel and Meruem are both like, no, do what he says. We're not worth saving. Just get out of here. Save yourself. Let his nin go. But Knuckle, showing the ultimate side of his character, cannot deal with that. He would not be able to forgive himself if anything happened to his father figure.
There. It's done. APR is deactivated.
And it's why I love Knuckle. He is unapologetically himself. And in that moment, even more so than ever, right? He knew there was no other way for him to get out of there and save his teacher and his Chimera Ant buddy. And he weighed that against, but if I don't save them, Youpi is out of commission, basically. We will take away his nin and make him an easier target to take out. A definite win for everybody, but he decides not to. And it's that act of selfishness that, if I'm being honest, makes me love Knuckle even more. And it even leads to Youpi respecting them as a warrior, and Poof's like, kind of like, you know, why are you letting them live? And Youpi's like, you don't get it, you just don't understand. And to see that warrior's honor in Youpi as well, once again, made me kind of like the guy. And that's like the 5th Chimera Ant that Togashi's like, but you like him, right? You enjoy this character.
I don't need to kill you right now. That's all.
Yeah, this is one of the best fight scenes and interactions within the entire arc. It's the kind of buildup that has been waiting. Once we heard the matchup between Knuckle and Youpi, you know, we knew that that fight was going to be intense. We then kind of cut to the awakening of Palm, right? So Palm, it has been converted into a Chimera Ant, sadly. And we get this really cool interaction between her and Killua, where he kind of breaks down. And this causes her to remember everything and turn against the little chibi Poof that is controlling her. And I really enjoyed this. I was very worried for Palm, and then seeing her become a Chimera Ant, I was like, oh no, they're gonna have to defeat Palm or take her out. And it's just gonna be another stack on top of why Gon doesn't like the Chimera Ants. But that wasn't the case. Palm still remembered herself and still decided to side with her friends. And it was a really cool subversion of the trope of, you know, oh no, your friends joined the bad guys kind of thing. We then kind of regroup with everybody. Ikalgo comes back. They rejoin Knuckle, and Knuckle and Killua are both like, we gotta go get Gon. We gotta help him fight. And as they're moving to do that, we get Netero versus meruem. Once again, not gonna break down the whole battle, but gonna talk about the highlights that hit me the hardest. One, Netero's power. The whole setup with the flashback and him training to like punch in like milliseconds basically, and like doing 100 punches every 2 seconds or whatever it was, something crazy like that. And then seeing the multi-fisted thing that I'm not going to try to pronounce the name of, it's just insane. And to see meruem standing against this master of nin, this insane hunter, to the point where Netero has to use the zero hand, his strongest attack on meruem, and that is still not enough. And the entire time, meruem is just trying to talk him down, just trying to be like, you don't have to do this, man. There's another way we can handle this. Even if that like realization is tainted, because he's like, you've moved me and humans will survive in a special area, but it shows that the king was capable of growth, which Netero does take into consideration. But Netero refuses, and he knows what he has to do as he unleashes the poor man's rose.
The king felt true fear for the first time.
This thing is like 19 nukes stacked together. This thing is insane. Nothing survives this bomb from the way that Netero describes it. In the way that Togashi had interwoven this imagery of roses and stuff leading up to this moment, like, I remember watching the episode and they're explaining like the rose stuff, and I'm like, what is going on? Why is this relevant at all? And then Netero unleashes it, and I'm like, Togashi, you beautiful son of a bitch. His way of setting up something that you feel will be insignificant or even just like supplementary information, and then tying it perfectly into the main story and what is going on is, it's just so well done. Togashi's a goat. He's such a good writer. So Netero does give up his life to detonate the poor man's rose, and meruem does basically die, right? Youpi and Pouf come and save him in one of the weirdest scenes I've ever seen in an anime, but they bring Meruem back from the brink of death, and he has forgotten some of his memories, right? And Pouf decides he's going to keep Komagi from the king, trying to conceal it. And this is why I said that Pouf is kind of the reason for why everything in this latter half goes down between him and the king, because he just refuses to tell Meruem about Komagi, but it's because of that flaw of his that, you know, he needs everything to be perfect, that he chooses to withhold that information. And while I hate Pouf, I think that it is by design. I think that all of this and the way that he reacts to Meruem losing his memories and the choosing to keep information from him and everything was because Togashi wrote a very good villain that you are meant to hate with a passion. Like I said about some of the other Chimera ants, you are meant to feel and sympathize with them, but this is what brings up that gray area with Leol and other types of Chimera ants where you know that they're only like Zazan, who are only going out there to spread or control and gain power. Pouf falls into that camp. That really makes it prevalent, that ambiguity that most fans will have when experiencing the Chimera ants as a reader. We then get back to Gon and Pitou as Pitou has finished healing Komagi, and the crew kind of comes and offers Gon their help. Gon refuses, but tells them to take Komagi with them as a hostage to ensure that Pitou doesn't try anything funny. And this is just so against Gon's character up until this moment, but in a good way. It shows just how far he's willing to go to get his revenge in this moment, how overcome he is by that vengeance and by that need to take Pitou out himself, to the point where he damages himself to defeat Pitou. He sacrifices his entire body and his ability of Nin to take himself to a point where he can defeat Pitou. And to see this play out and Gon fighting Pitou and just absolutely wrecking him, right? And seeing Killua trying so hard to get to his friend and then coming up on Gon, I'm getting emotional just talking about it now. And Killua, upon seeing Gon and seeing what he's done, it just, I said so many times throughout the first part how well written the relationship between Killua and Gon was this arc, which it is every arc. We've seen these boys become the best of friends, become brothers. Killua overcoming his brother's control because of what Biscuit said to him about, you will lose Gon if you do not step up and stop running away from fights. It all comes full circle here, where even though Killua did that, he still lost Gon, but he lost Gon because of Gon, and he knows he has to do something. And this really just, this was a pinnacle of the arc for me. There was a lot of moments that hit a very high peak, and this was one of them. The fight between Pitou and Gon and the subsequent aftermath with Killua and needing to get Gon out of there was, it was almost earth-shattering, if I'm honest. Like it just, Togashi wrote one of the best examples of being there for a friend that you could, even if the friend is the cause of the damage. So we then get to the finale of the arc with the Pitou and Gon fight and Meruem and Netero fight kind of acting as a climax, right? We get this moment between Pouf and Meruem where he asks him to play a game. Find the other two traitors before me and Youpi find Pitou, who is, gone by now, and I will tell you, what is you're not remembering kind of thing. It's basically the stuff I've mentioned several times already, where Pouf kind of screwed the pooch, so to say, towards the end of this arc, and how he was handling Meruem, who did find the other true intruders, and we get this really cool moment with him and Welfin. which I thought Welfin was going to pass, but as we know at the end of the arc, he does go on to try and find Gyro. But yeah, this kind of leads to the fizzle out of the arc, right? Hoof passes away from, he like starts bleeding out of his mouth. Hoof dies because the poor man's rose has a contingency where if you survive the bomb, the poison will get you, which means that Meruem, even now having regained all of his memories, will pass away. And he chooses to do this with Komugi.
Komugi, are you there?
Yes, I sure am. I'm not going anywhere.
And this is it. This is Meruem's complete arc, right? He becomes human in his final moments. He wants to be with someone that he saw as a companion in this life, not someone who was beneath him, not someone that was above him, which there was no one in his mind, but someone that was almost an equal to him. And he never once beat her.
Good night, Meruem.
So Meruem succumbs to his wounds and dies in Kogumi's arms, who passes away shortly after. What a way to end such a rivalry. The arc ends on a down note, kind of, right? The condition of Gon is concerning. He has lost an arm, and we see his hand in what can only be described as a necrotic state. And we have this kind of like brevity at the end as well, where we do find out that Meruem's twin sister, the fetus that Colt had taken from the Chimera Ant Queen and raised, is going by Kite. So maybe his memories are somewhere out there in this Chimera Ant. We have to kind of wait and see for that. Before I get into my final thoughts on the arc, there are a few things I want to mention quickly. Shoot's arc in this second part, I kind of had to trim out. I know it's a big part of it, but with everything else going on, I felt those were more important moments. But I do want to shine a light that Shoot is a goat. He went through so much, and to come out alive and still well, like everybody but Palm and Gon really came out of this unaffected physically. Netero was the only loss, which is a massive loss to the Hunter community, which is something we'll talk about in my next arc review. But all in all, I think the raid was successful. It just left a mental scar on everyone. In closing, I feel like nobody really won when it comes down to the end of the Chimera Ant arc. While the Hunters were successful in their battle against the Ants, it feels like they were all left a little bit mentally scarred from this, a product of war that we see in real life ourselves. And speaking of real life, I think it is pretty evident that Togashi used the atomic attacks on Japan as inspiration for the final parts of this arc, and possibly the Chimera Ants themselves. The Poor Man's Rose is definitely a substitute for nuclear warfare within the story, with the poison that it leaves on its victims reflecting radiation sickness afterwards. And weirdly enough, I don't know if this is inspiration on Togashi's part or if it paid into anything. One thing I found very intriguing that I would be remiss if I didn't bring up in the video is that the victims of Nagasaki and Hiroshima that survived would march in lines, very badly burned and wounded from the nuclear attack, and they were known as the ant crawlers. And it almost makes me wonder if this thematic element of nuclear warfare that ties into the end didn't also bear some inspiration for the Chimera Ants themselves. And if you want to know why they called them the ant crawlers, I can't describe it here because it is a very visceral thing, and it's just not something I want to speak about right now. I do implore you to do a little bit of research yourself into it. It's a very gruesome and a real depiction of how that went down. But with Togashi being born in the 60s, he would have been a child relatively soon after those attacks, so I think it was something prevalent that he probably carried over into his adulthood. But to move away from the nuclear aspect of inspiration for this arc, I said it multiple times throughout the video, and I will preach it again here, that Togashi's ability to write this morally complex antagonist in this arc should be praised completely. And as I said at the beginning of my final thoughts, nobody really won here. But I think that was once again by design on Togashi's part. You don't feel like the Hunters had some kind of supreme victory over the Ants because the Ants are still out there in some way or form. Some of them have integrated into our society itself. And the Hunters suffered a great loss in not only Kite but Netero, as I'd said. So everyone lost something important. And it's hard to put into words just how much the impact of Togashi's writing had on me during this arc. I think it deserves completely every single bit of praise it gets, but I do see some valid criticisms of the arc out there. As I said earlier, the Pitou versus Morel fight is a down point in the arc, and I could even understand how some people may not have liked the Komagi and Gunji stuff that took away from the arc as we were watching it. I, for one, found it fascinating, and I loved those little moments of brevity. I almost found myself anticipating them more when the raid was still being planned. I wanted to see what was going on there and seeing the humanity of the king develop. But yeah, overall, I think the Chimera Ant arc is one of the best showings of the entire Hunter x Hunter series. I said in my last video that I probably thought it was my favorite arc, but then I read the Secession arc, and let me tell you guys, anime onlys are not ready for what Togashi has cooked up in the manga. But we will get to that the next time we talk about Hunter x Hunter, which shouldn't be too long now. But as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. That's a big one. I'm trying to hit 500 subs right now, and I'm getting pretty close. As always, I've been StrawHatLucas. More importantly than anything I've said about this amazing arc in this video today, though, I want you to have a wonderful, wonderful night.